Good evening, everyone. My name's Akash Magoon. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Adonis. We're a revenue cycle automation company that helps medical practices and hospitals automate their medical billing. But today's not about me. Today's about our three illustrious guests. First, we have Sap Sinha. Sap is the Chief Operating Officer of Allied Digestive Health. We have Sean, the Chief Revenue Officer at Deca Dental. And lastly, we have Dil, who is a private equity investor at Nissic Ventures and is also on the board of the ACTS Retirement. Please join me in a round of applause. I'd first like to introduce Sap. Sap is, again, the Chief Operating Officer at Allied Digestive Health, one of the most fastest growing gastroenterology businesses in the country. Sap, you got your start as a management consultant and now as an operations leader at one of the fastest growing medical clinics. Tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are.
Thanks for inviting me, and it's a privilege to talk to you. I was in consulting for 12 plus years. So last, to your point, at BCG, I led digital health. I think what was frustrating as a consultant was that I was just advising, right? So there was no operational aspect to it. And as I got more immersed in healthcare, I realized that there is so much to do in the provider side of things, so providing in healthcare. And a lot of our costs are in the healthcare system is locked up there. That's where you take out pharma profits, you take out insurance profits, 70% of our costs are there, and then 30% of it is a waste. So that kind of propagated, and I got, again, you have to be lucky. So I wouldn't say consultants should be given direct operational roles because we are too high level till we actually have to do work. But I got lucky as there was an ex-BCG person who was CEO of a company, knew me, gave me an opportunity, and that's kind of then it was a TPG-backed private equity group backed organization, got sold with Optum, which buys everything. And then left that to join Allied Digestive Health, again, because I knew a consultant who's one of the investors. So it's been a great journey, and I'm very fortunate to where I am.
Next up, we have Sean Thompson. Again, Sean's the Chief Revenue Officer at Deca Dental. Sean was born in South Africa, but now lives in Dallas. And you also got your career started off in consulting and financial advisory. Tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. So I've been in healthcare, mostly in the revenue cycle management space for about 15 years. Fell into it a little bit accidentally. So as you said, it came in from the finance route. Got involved with a large PE-backed emergency medicine staffing company. So got to see a little bit of the ins and outs of how that worked. And then after that, I actually started my own healthcare consulting company focused on revenue cycle management. It was more on building kind of the internal operations as far as staffing, payer negotiations, working with different fee schedules, et cetera, and just trying to make the RCM process a little bit more optimized. And then moved to a similar role, but with a large organization in the anesthesia space, so also physician staffing, which is, if you know anything about anesthesia billing, it's a little bit tricky. There's a lot of units and minutes and all that. So it was a nice little way to get a little bit more understanding about how things go in that space. And then from there, transitioned. I've been in my current role with Deca Dental for about a year now, which has been very different than the medical space. I would say there's this adage that a lot of people say that dental's 10 years behind medical. It's 100% true. So, which, we'll talk a little bit about Adonis and things like that, but there's a lot of white space in that industry.
Thank you. And lastly, Dil. Dil is our diverse member of our panel. He is not an operator. He's an investor at Nissic Ventures, but has grown as a sales and marketing leader in the past in the automotive space. Dil, tell us about just your journey as both an operator on the sales and marketing side at automotive companies. What got you into private equity? And more specifically around healthcare, what keeps you excited about it?
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. I probably had an atypical route to be in front of you. I met a gentleman at a barbecue 13 years ago, and he had Parkinson's and he had Crohn's, no relation to me, I ended up being a friend of his for 5 years in his home, and then he moved into a senior care facility where I was his caretaker. And one day he asked me, would you mind being on the board here? I didn't realize it then, but it ended up being a significant turnaround situation. And then it launched me into ACTS, the third largest senior care healthcare provider in the nation. So I've seen this through the personal side, and I'm glad to share a few tidbits along with you.
Thank you. So the topic of today's discussion is around using technology to advance and scale healthcare organizations. And in my view, the word scale is very subjective. Scale can mean different things depending on the type of business that you're running. SAP and Sean join us from private equity-backed healthcare groups, and SAP, your group, is backed by Assured Healthcare Partners. Talk to us about the types of goals and the scale plans that your team has and how private equity has impacted your business.
Why is private equity in healthcare is because it's the $5 trillion question, right? There's a lot of money here. And there's a lot of inefficiencies. So if you look at the kind of care delivery model, we can actually create value and take out inefficiencies, right? So and these are numbers which are thrown around, and there's a lot of aspect around it that 30-35% is waste. And we've also accepted a lot of things in healthcare delivery. Why should RCM cost 6 to 10% of your revenue, right? What is the use for it? What is the administration that every clinician has to have 3 to 4 people? So I think that's where, and why I'm very fortunate in life, so I could choose the kind of private equity I wanted to work with, and that was the kind of discussion I was having. And Assured is very kind of executive-centric in the sense that they're very hands-off. So they said, all right, you solve it. We have an investment thesis, but you solve it. So that was the first kind of interaction, is like, obviously I have to return, it's private equity, there's a return to investment and all those kinds of things. But there is a lot of things you can change because a lot of the private equity model is, okay, you take, do certain roll-ups, you add debt, then you sell to the next person. We actually are unlevered. We don't have debt right now on our books, and which is very strange, but because we have been fixing the operations, and we can scale at a pretty fast rate because we are using technology first kind of view, and that allows to meet the private equity goals of number of physicians and clinicians, et cetera, and then also deliver value. And at this point, we can lever up when the markets, people are already over-levered, and go buy things at a lower multiple. So that's kind of what we have been very focused on, and that's where Adonis comes in. A lot of other technology aspects and assets comes in for us.
Thank you. And Sean, your group at Deca Dental is backed by Blackstone. Talk to us what it means to be a Blackstone portfolio company, and what sort of tools that they give you for scale, and what that means for your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great experience so far. Just a little bit on Deca. So we're what's called a DSO, or a dental service organization. Our brand in the market is Ideal Dental. We're in 9 states and have about 155 locations or so. With that, our predominant growth model is de novo. So we literally build them ground up. And with that, there's obviously a cost to doing that, from a construction cost to the build out to the staffing and all that. And I think having a backer like Blackstone that understands that de novo model, which is different than most DSOs. Most DSOs will go out there, find a doc that's done well, has 5, 10 locations, 1 location, whatever, and buy them and integrate it, which works, but there's integration risk. There's also timeline risk, all of that. We've built a playbook over the last 15 years to be able to do that, or build the de novos relatively quickly, as well as scale them up as quickly as we can. Obviously, technology plays a large role, similar to what SAP was saying. But at the end of the day, Blackstone has bought into that thesis. They believe we're different, and we differentiate ourselves not only from the de novo model, but just the quality of care that we provide our guests, as we call them. That's a bit of a, maybe a throwaway statement, but we believe it. So, at the end of the day, I think having a partner that understands that vision, that's willing to put the capital behind it, and maybe do things a little bit different as far as, not just acquisitions, but building things from the ground up, I think has been great.
And for the audience, do you mind describing the differences between de novo strategy versus maybe growing through M&A?
Yeah. So The way we typically do it is we go through a pretty rigorous site selection process. So we'll look all over the country really at the end of the day and then boil it down to certain large metro areas or MSAs that are growing relatively quickly. We try to be ahead of the growth. And with that, we try to say, okay, well, this city or state is going to be growing by X% over the coming months or years and looking to see how we can leverage that. Whereas just going out and finding a doctor that's done well and kind of adopting their model and really effectively just buying their cash flow and maybe trying to grow it through other different ways that sometimes work, sometimes don't. We can, the nice thing about the Novo strategy is you've got kind of that culture that begins from that buildup, so you don't have to try and assimilate somebody else's culture into your culture, which I think we all know with any acquisition can be one of the most trickiest parts is getting the culture right. So we get to build that from the ground up, which is great.
Sap, I'm curious for your business, your team has grown largely through acquiring other groups. How have you identified which deals and what groups to go and acquire? And then to Sean's point, how do you actually think about merging those groups into Allied Digestive Health as a parent company and an MSO?
Yeah, so for us, number one criteria is clinical quality. I know it's, but like what I cannot do is get better physicians. I'm not a physician. And so that has been our number one criteria. We walked away from deals where we have found out certain clinical quality issues, et cetera, because unfortunately doctors talk to doctors and they respect other doctors. So if they know that the good ones, like in our practice, so we are now the largest in the Northeast. We are in New York, New Jersey, about 300 plus clinicians. When I joined, we were about 53 years ago. But we have, the president of AGA, the other very prominent physicians who are part of it, and they attract, oh, Dr. Tenner is in, I want to join that group. So that has been our number one criteria. I think culture is a big piece of it. Also, we want to, it's been easier in larger acquisition because generally we can figure out the culture, right? And there's a lot more due diligence process in a larger acquisition, 3, 5, 10, 15, 30 docs if you're going after. It's been harder on we want to be in the market, but there's only like 1 or 2 doc, and their culture and how they work is very different. So those have been harder to kind of assimilate and figure out, and we spend a lot of time. And now we are at a stage where we are walking away from those small deals and just doing larger ones. But that's been the trick around it. But the number one criteria comes is you have to have great docs.
And Dil, on the senior living side, it's been a pretty interesting past decade for you and the team, given the aging population of the country. How has the aging population impacted the way that you guys think about operations and scaling your business?
Well, it's caused us to accelerate how we grow because doing it organically and building communities takes time. So if you're having 11,000 people a day retire just here in the US of boomers, you've got to scale pretty fast. So what we focused on is purely M&A or affiliations, alliances, if you would, and that's what's caused our growth from about $1.3 billion assets under management to $2.8 billion and 20,000 residents and employees. So as you mentioned, Sean Guest, we call our folks who live with us residents because it's 24/7 care between independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing.
And what role has technology played in helping facilitate that growth?
It's played a tremendous role because most single site and smaller multi-site organizations don't have the bandwidth and the funds to invest in all the things that are needed in today's world to take care of, if you would, an 80-year-old in their home or with assisted technologies, Internet of Things, the connectivity that's needed between EHR and the regulations to do billing, if you would, the coding. So when you're in independent living, you take care of yourself. But once you go up that scale, and all of us have parents and grandparents, it becomes difficult as a caregiver. And that's where the connectivity is not being handled at the smaller scale. And scale and technology helps to bridge those opportunities.
And Sean, to turn that question to you, Deca Dental has been known to be an early adopter of technology. What does technology mean for your business?
Yeah, I think it's super important. So just a little bit of a statistic. In 2023, we averaged an office opening every 2 weeks. So with that, that's a lot of quick ramp up, lots of quick just adoption of our practices, the way we do things, systems, all of that. So it's been really good to have a suite of things that we can just kind of plug and play, and that applies to both on the RCM side, but also on the clinical side. We have a kind of a standard of care that uses a specific scanning device that allows both the provider to be more efficient, but also the guest to be able to see a little bit more of where there might be some decay or something like that. So at the end of the day, being able to kind of plug those specific systems in while we scale is super important. I also think, though, to be frank, there's a lot of opportunity on the RCM side. As I mentioned, dental's behind, but RCM tends to be behind just generally. It's kind of like a back office function that's, once the patient's seen, it's almost kind of like, hey, we did our part, now it's time for you guys to do yours. And I think, which is good in one sense, there's a ton of opportunity. I think in the other sense, it's almost like ignored in a way. So I think, we have work to do on the RCM side, which is, part of why we're doing what we're doing with Adonis.
And Sap, you come from a data analytics and technology background from your days in consulting. How have you applied what you learned in the first half of your career to what you're doing now?
I get to see a lot of technology just because of the kind of roles I still play across the board, not just in ADH, but outside. The thing about, which is a great point Sean is making, is that RCM is the oil of the whole engine, right? And if you were to think about MSO or any provider practice, to be honest, it starts at the front office. RCM starts when the patient walks in, and we underpay them. $15, $20, $25 person who takes the demographic information, which if you make a mistake down the line, doesn't do the insurance work, doesn't collect co-pays, everything. And then you have clinicians, right, who have to do the right work, take the medical records and notes. And then you have the billers and coders who are supposed to do the work. We do pay clinicians well in this country. We are one of the highest paying across the board, but we don't pay our coders and billers. They move around. For $1 more, they will quit, etc. So those two, which are the most important, and don't tell my HR and finance team that, but those are the two very important functions. And so that's completely ripe for technology disruption, right? So we were the first adopters in machine learning in coding. 80% of our coding is done by machines. We don't have humans who code. We have auditors, CPC auditors, because you can't let machines do their own stuff. So we really attacked that portion of it. Then we said, all right, but our physicians are writing terrible notes. So because as we are machine learning and coding, because people, most of the physicians just write whatever, put a code, and that gets billed in most of the practices. That's once you get audited on our scale, we are the third largest GI company now in the country, we will get audited, right? So we will have to have. So we started using ambient AI now, and we are introducing technology around that. And then the front office staff, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to input your insurance card. Go to ZocDoc and try to figure out which is your insurance. I don't care which insurance you have. You cannot figure that out. So we've now worked with Athena to introduce an AI technology which pings the insurance company directly and pulls the demographic data. So it doesn't matter you move from one address to the other, there's a spelling mistake, whatever, it populates that. And now you've reduced the burden on the front office staff and all those things. So technology can really play a huge role, especially now with machine learning and AI and large language models, et cetera, to change the way we think about the business. But it's a very hard way for physicians, because many a times these are small practices which we are acquiring, and they think we've done this for 30 years, but they really don't know what they were missing. So that's been the change management challenge. Has been, technology is easy. It's the change management which has been very hard. And also like people thinking, oh, wow, a technology is doing this, but I lose the job, all those things. So those things have to be thought through.
Sean, is billing and revenue cycle as messy in your business as it is in SAP's?
Yeah, and every other RCM organization I've been in, it is. And I like that you brought up the lack of kind of incentive payment for these folks. I mean, we try to bonus and all that, but at the end of the day, they will leave for a certain dollar amount. They will. And I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's a challenge to keep them motivated. It's a challenge to have them have that rigor every day when they're sitting on the phone with a payer for 2 hours and they're just, it's a waste of time, honestly. So yeah, I think it is just a mess is the right way to describe it, which again means there's a ton of opportunity. The nice thing about RCM is pretty stepwise, right? It's sort of codified. You can kind of put it into code, which is nice. But the adoption and getting folks to buy in and, do we really need this and will this take my job and all that? Yeah, those are all top of mind questions for sure.
I wanted to ask a bit of a sensitive question within healthcare, which is this idea of achieving mission versus margin. As healthcare provider groups continue to scale, how do you think about improving patient outcomes versus increasing revenues and margins for the business? Maybe, Dill, we can start with you.
Sure. I certainly think that without margin, there is no mission. There are all the things that we can do to help increase that margin actually helps the mission. And so that's a thinking that I believe that is needed more so from other industries into healthcare, as you mentioned, whether it's the dental side or the senior living side or any other side. There are other folks who have been there, done that, and fixed issues that we still need to challenge ourselves with, like you are here, and adopt quicker. And that's the challenge. But that change management side that you mentioned is a challenge because that's cultural. And that's the biggest challenge. Technology is there.
Yeah, I think it's a yes and in both. You have to kind of do both. And I think, most people go to the dentist once a year, maybe twice a year. So we have that opportunity to go in and provide the best quality care that we can, right? But sometimes that may look like, hey, why do I need Invisalign? Or why are you doing this or that or the other thing? And sometimes that's a question for our guests. It's like, hey, is this margin or is this health care that you're providing me? And I think at the end of the day, we've trained our clinicians really well to be able to address those concerns. Part of it is our scanning technology that we can, show them a little bit more clearly. But at the end of the day, there is no practice without that margin.
Yeah, I was joking with Sean earlier that I went through Invisalign for 2 years and it was a $10,000 process. And right when I got them off, my dentist pitched me on veneers. And so it's a So in the audience, we have a number of folks that are technologists and aspiring healthcare builders. Sap, tell us about some of the biggest problems that you face right now scaling your business, and what are some of the things that you hope to get solved over the next couple of years using technology?
So first of all, I want to address the last question. I don't think mission and margin are they are separate. It's the same. Like not-for-profits, hospitals are for-profits. So they're profit adjacent. Let's put it this way. To your point, Dill, it is critical. And to be honest, there is so much to be had because if I am the best GI group, which we foresee, and that's our vision and everything in the country, we will have margins, right? So if we are providing the patient outcomes, and which is like you can Google us, it's 4.8 Google reviews across the board, wherever, you will have margins. So that's the biggest challenge right now in at least across healthcare, and I'm sure it's happening in dental and everything, is I don't know how we are going to take care of our patients. I do not just know how we will do that because we are not producing enough doctors. We are not producing enough clinicians. We are not, like, you try to get to with my doctors, it's 8 to 12 weeks. You have a GI issue, and you have a huge pain, and you have to wait to see one of my physicians 8 to 12 weeks, right? So we are now adding these mid-levels, nurse practitioners and everything, but that's an intermediate solve. So technology is going to enable us because that is why we're using EMRs are terrible, right? They become data operators, our doctors. So we are using ambient AI and everything. So that is a marginal improvement in their use of time, et cetera. But that is the biggest challenge. And obviously, private equity, and when the second bite happens or third bite happens, that 65-year-old who is, has got that check, he's going to retire. And what then? We are not producing enough doctors. I just don't understand our medical education, and we are thinking about it because some of it does not make sense. It's only unique to United States. 4 years undergrad. Why? Nowhere in the world people do that. You want to go to med school, you go to med school, 5 years, 6 years. 3-year residency. You want to be a cardiovascular surgeon, you have to do general surgery for 3 years. Why? You're never going to touch any part of the body except that. So it's just that we are not changing our education system fast enough. And I don't know how we're going to take. So that's been the challenge. And we are also thinking about is like telehealth, adjacent aspects, through technologies to drive patient care forward.
Thank you. Wanted to end the conversation just talking about competition within healthcare. When you think about running one of the fastest growing dental groups or in the senior living space or in the GI space, there's a lot of competition and a lot of different changes and trends in the way that healthcare providers are performing their businesses and also the way that patients seek care. How do you continue iterating on your business and making sure that you stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, I think, going back to that culture piece, and again, that can be a little bit of a throwaway statement, but we've tried to put the guest in the best possible position to receive the best quality care, and I think that shows. Just, you mentioned Google reviews. We are at 4.7. We have an 85 NPS score, so our patients do like the service we provide. So, we try to innovate, we try to bring new technology in for the patient. We tried to do things like, just a simple example is, we implemented a text to pay last year. Like, that was revolutionary for us, and it seems so simple, but just removing the friction from the guest and be able to, after their service, to be able to pay any bills or anything like that, it's become really, game changing for us. So just thinking in those kind of ways. But competition, it's there. There's other DSOs that are much bigger than us that are all around a lot of our locations, but we don't necessarily ignore that, but we try to just focus on what we need to do, and that's just provide the highest quality clinical care and make sure that we're doing it for a fair price and that we have good reimbursement, and that's the end of the day. And then obviously, making sure the operations functions achieve those goals. So I think just trying to focus on that.
Dil?
I would say that certainly with the folks that come live with us, there's more of a challenge with the recent pandemic of folks being a little more reticent about congregate living. So there's aging in place. So folks are choosing to live in their homes and have the care come to them one way or another. Well, as was mentioned, there's not enough caregivers. How many of us want different folks taking care of our parents or grandparents on an intimate basis every day or every week? I don't think they would be too happy with too many changes there. But when it's hard to get people, how do you take care of folks who live with you, if that's your model? And how do you take care of folks who may not economically afford to live with you, but need the care nonetheless? That's the model that technology can help play a part in.
Yep. For us, it's a very fragmented market like GI, so it's still consolidating. To be honest, I talk to all the leaders across the board in the GI market nationally because we are doing certain things together. For example, we are building this large data set for GI right now where GastroHealth, us, one GI, I'm talking to one GI CEO in a week, we are all like kind of congregating and creating a data set because it can drive clinical value, value-based care, a lot of different things. So there is very much there is competition obviously for fellows, for the new physicians. Everyone's overpaying at this moment. We used to pay $300,000, now we pay $450,000, $500,000 in 3 years. But in general, from a business perspective, the competition is less. I think the other competition is hospital-owned medical groups, Summits, Optums of the world. I think our model is a little different. That helps, which is because ultimately these physicians are partners in the business. So they are independent in that sense. Nobody's telling them, like if you work for a hospital medical group, you are told 15-minute increments, you have to work 5 days a week, these are the RVU targets, all those things. We don't do that. You want to work 3 days a week over the weekend, get to whatever your compensation is, go at it, right? So that it's a lifestyle choice. Where we are obviously getting against the wall, hitting against the wall is these fellows who are coming out, they have $500,000 loans, right? And we just can't match a $600,000, $700,000 the hospitals are willing to pay because they have other ways to get, pay for fellows through government and certain other programs, and especially academic programs, they get grants. That's a hard question because I'm telling this fellow who's in the mid 30s, has $500,000, like, listen, over 10 years, you're gonna make more money. So they're like, so I will just make more money right now. So that's the competition which we haven't, and then none of these physicians read their contracts and they're like competed out. They have to be outside the state. So those are the kinds of things which makes it difficult for us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you all traveled from afar to spend some time with us. So please join me in giving a round of applause for the panelists.